Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Hopefully, you've seen all the lecture series so far. So, this is going to be our fourth lecture, and in this, I'm going to cover comments, data types, and arithmetic. I did mention about arithmetic earlier, but I will cover some basics of it and, show you in the program how it's working. And, even in this chapter, we're still working on the fundamentals. So, uh, hopefully you're able to log into Eris and play around with the program and stuff like that. But it's still the building blocks. It's still initial. But hopefully, well, my plan is this week I'm going to be assigning you a homework that you can all work on. So that should give you exposure to writing your own program. Okay? So comments. There are two types of comments. I shouldn't say two types, but there are two ways that you can write a comment. One is this version of slash. Okay. Anything followed by it is a comment. Then the other version is this slash and an asterisk. But here's the catch though. Anytime you have this, it has to be, you also need a closing. So this is the start of the comment. This is the end of the comment. Let me show you what I mean by this. Let's go here, right? Test1 dot cpp. Okay, so in here to insert, I'm going to insert the two types of comments and watch. And one thing to keep in mind is watch out for the color. Test comment. Okay. Okay. All right, let's go back to this. So test comment, as I was saying, yes. Okay. See the color? So let's say if I had only one selection here. Insert, backspace. See the color change? That's probably going to be a compilation error, but no, notice here. Now the other type of comment is this one. See all the color changed after it. What that means, this is the start of the comment, and this denotes the end of the comment. See the color change once again? Okay, so these are the different two ways that you can have comments in your code. Now, one thing to keep in mind is make sure you practice this and have and try to use this for the rest of your career, may it be academic or out in the industry, is whenever you write code, put enough comments in there that the user understands what you're trying to do. Because, I go into code and I look at some code that's 15 years old. I'm not going to understand it right away, but having comments helps big time. So comments, we typically have comments in the beginning of the program. You write your name, um, the type of program, what it's doing, etc. And then not to have comments for each and every line that you write, but generally try to explain your logic, what you're trying to do in the program. What is the program supposed to do? And this is something that I'll look for when I grade the program. So make it a habit from the beginning that you have comments in your code. Your life's going to be easier. The one who reads your code years down the line, his life's going to be easier. And if they follow the same methodology, which they should, it'll make your life easier when you have to look at someone else's code. Okay? All right. Now moving on to data types. These are the different data types that are available today. So there's a short, okay, which is 2 bytes or 16 bits, integer, short for int, we call it int, and you saw me using in that previous program ints. And then we have long, which are 4 bytes or 32 bits. And then we have a long. So if you have a really long integer sequence of numbers, and by the way, all of these data types are used for numbers. Okay. Long is 8 bytes, 64 bits. Unsigned short is 2 bytes. Forgot the hyphen there. Unsigned int, you notice the int and unsigned int, that's platform dependent, and there's no specific limitation on that. Um, Unsigned long is 4 bytes or 32 bits. Unsigned long is 8 bytes or 64 bits. Now, if you if you're following this naming methodology, int is just a integer, right? Now, long is just a long number that you have that you're trying to depict it in your program. So when you initialize it, you'll call it long. But if something is extra long, then you'll probably end up using long, long. Unsigned short, um, that's also used unsigned int, unsigned long. The only difference between unsigned and the ones which are signed is, if it's not obvious, then maybe it's not, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I'll make sure I explain it. So if you don't have unsigned in there, then the number could either be negative or positive. Um, but if it's unsigned, even if you put a negative in there, I think it's been a while since I tried. It might be compiler dependent, but unsigned means there's no sign um, preceding it. It's not a negative, it's not a positive, it's just a number. Double and float, that's really for your decimal values. So a number such as 0.123 or 1.2 or 1 point something could be a double or a float. Um, you don't really have to remember how many bits each one of this is, nor am I going to quiz you on it. It won't be in the test, but just have a general idea as to what a short is and int is, long, signed versus unsigned. Because when you're writing your program, you will choose a data type that matches your need. If you have a really large number, chances are you're going to use long, long. And if it's a regular size, you'll use int. I tend to use int, double or float. I think one of them is deprecate. Oh, I shouldn't say deprecate is not supported, but I'll tend to use either if you're using a decimal point, it's a float, or if it's not, it's an int. So for practical purposes, you'll use a decimal or a integer for most part. Now we also have these other data types, and they're not related to numbers. Um, so Boolean, bool as we call it, bool is the bool. Sorry, not bool. Bool is a keyword. It's just a Boolean value. It could be true or false. Now, if you recall earlier in the lecture, I mentioned that C++ is built on top of C. So all Boolean is, I should say bool, all bool is, it's a variable defined in the background that's supposed to take the value of either 0 or 1. 0 is false, 1 is true. Now in your program, you'll say bool something, and you'll set it to either true or false. But behind the scenes, it's actually just an integer that can take two values. Char, char, that's just a character. Wchar underscore t, once again similar to char. These are some of the data variables, I should say data types that I wanted to highlight. As we go further along in the case, you'll see strings, etc. You'll see classes from the standard libraries that are being used. But if you want to practice, go ahead, try to write a program, play around with it, use the different types of data types. That's really the best way that you can be familiar with the program. And I say it all the time. I mean, the only way to really be comfortable with all of this is, for example, if I go back, you see all of this. It might not make sense to you. It might not. If it's the first time you're looking at it, might not make a whole lot of sense. You're like, oh my God, how am I gonna remember the bytes for each one of this? But as and when you use it, it becomes easier. Like I know when I use int, it's fairly obvious. If it's a large number, a long, I have used unsigned numbers. Short, honestly, if you're using so let's say if you use a long, and if something is less than, if it's a short number, a small number, let's say it's 12 or number 1, 2, or single digit number, you can still use a long. But for my purposes, I tend to use integer quite a bit. Um, and you'll see examples of it later on. So don't let the size of each one of this scare you. So you don't have to memorize it. Okay, so the next thing is I touched on this briefly, the subtract, divide, and modulus. The adding, I showed you an example when we did the first program, what it's like to add two numbers. Hopefully you're comfortable with it, you tried it. Then the other one is subtract, divide, and modulus. I'll cover modulus a little bit more. I'll try to spend some time on it. When it comes to subtraction and division, okay, the I mean, as it is in your calculator or you do the subtraction or division, it's the same as it is. The only thing to be mindful of is if you divide one number by the other, okay, and that one is an integer, one is a double, or vice versa. What happens? So I want you to try this out. Divide one data type by another. Same for numbers itself. Don't try to have a character and then you divide that by a number or the other way around. But choose a number and try to have different data types for it and see what you get. Division, same. You've heard of it.
I took a short break, and I know I mentioned about the modulus operator, and what is modulus? Sometimes people go through many years in their career and they don't understand what a modulus operator is, and it does. So modulus, I'll try to explain it this way and see if it makes sense to you. And I can't really get any feedback instantly. That's a drawback of doing it online. So I don't know if you're actually following or it's making sense. But let me go ahead. So modulus is if you do A modulus B, the way it works is it divides A by B and then you get the remainder. So if you do 6 mod 3, 3 goes evenly into 6 two times, right? Then the remainder is 0. Now if you do 7 mod 3, what are you supposed to get? It does not go evenly into 7, right? 3 goes into 7 two times and there's a remainder of 1. Uh, so 7 mod 3 would be 1. And I'll try to write, we'll try to do a simple program just to illustrate that point. Um, and you can try out other examples to make this clear. So let's do this. Let's go to our test app. I'm going to be using this test.cpp very frequently. Now let's do this. I am going to, I don't think all of those STDs are needed. Back and forth. I insert. So I'll do cout mod operator. I'll do 7. Let's do 6 mod 3, right? Let's try this. Okay. And mod is just represented by the ampersand sign. Okay, so I am here. Escape. Let's do cpp. I can't type. Test1.cpp. Now I do that test1 data. Okay. Hello world, please enter number 1, 2, mod operator. You see 0 over there? Maybe I should have had a new line character. You know what? Let me make this slightly clearer. I'll place a new line character. 6 mod 7. Escape. Okay. Okay. What's going on here? Okay, now let's do cpp.test1 mod operator. We got 0. Now I will try 7 mod 3. And the reason why I go back into PuTTY and muck around with the program is I feel the best way to do something or learn something is to play around with it yourself. And I tend to do this back in the day when I was studying, and it helped me immensely. So hopefully you're able to follow along. If not, then try it out. The best way to learn is try it out for yourself. There's one advice that I could give you is try this again and again, and you will get the hang of it. CPP, okay. Oh, I have an error. Line number 23. Okay, let's go back to line 23. What is the error? Oh, okay, I have the symbol here. Should be. Sorry about that, okay. Mod operator 1. See? 7 mod 3, there is a remainder of 1. So, you'll see later on that programmers tend to use this because, like, if you were to think about it, mod operator, division, or these kind of operation. When was the last time I tried to work on these basic arithmetic? Fourth grade, or even before? It's been a while, but no, mod operators are still used up till this day in the industry. Okay, so now you know those basic operators and the data types. What I'm going to do is illustrate to you how, with a few examples, what happens or how you work with unsigned versus signed data type. We mentioned the unsigned int or the signed int. So if you just say an int, right, and if you don't have the unsigned before it, it's understood that it's a signed number or a unsigned long versus just a long. Unsigned long, there's no sign, it's not negative or positive, versus long, it does have negative or positive. So if it's not unsigned, you can understand it to mean that it's signed. So let me go ahead and go into this program and modify this a little bit and illustrate via a few programs as to how it's working. Let's do this, okay? Unsigned int, okay? And let's do this. We'll take out the mod operator. We don't want to muck around with that. And I don't want to see the sum either. What I do want to do is just output unsigned int was what user, int value is, okay, user entered value 1, okay. std.cout unsigned let's see. And while I'm doing this, can you guess what's going to happen if I were to put a sign in front of the unsigned integer? How is it going to behave? Okay, so I've got two ints, okay? One is a signed int, the first one is integer, the second one is unsigned int, okay? And I'm going to take in the two values and then output one at a time. Now can I do the sum again and see how it behaves? And hopefully by now you guessed it. Signed versus unsigned, right? If it's int, meaning by default it's negative or positive. If it's unsigned, it doesn't have a negative or positive before it. But think in your mind, if I do enter a negative before it, how is it going to react? Try to guess it. I'm going to play around with it and let me show you. I'm going to compile it. Oh, okay. Now, int main, unused variable. It is telling me this should be a warning, right? So initially when we talked about the syntax error, as you see the color, it's red. The warning, the program is still going to compile and you can continue on. It's a warning. I have a sum variable in there that I never used throughout the program. So it's letting me know, hey, are you sure you want to do this? I am sure because I purposely had it in there. So I'm not saying ignore the warning, but it's just a compiler's way of telling you, hey, something's going on, you need to pay attention. So let me go ahead and ignore this warning because it's on purpose. Out, okay. What was the first one? It was an integer, right? So it has a sign. Second one, okay, int value -1, unsigned int value was 1. Okay, straightforward enough. Now, how about I do this? For the unsigned, I put a negative sign in front of it. How do you think it's going to behave? I'm not going to. See that? Oops. What happened there? Think about it. Okay? You'll have the answer in the future videos. It's kind of interesting, right? You might have thought that it's going to ignore the negative sign, but here it gave you a completely different value. And how about if I were to do this? How about if I typed in +1? Here's 1, here's +1. It didn't crap out over there. So think about the difference, what happened. Okay, let me try to show you guys with what is it? With longs, signed and unsigned long. Check out what I did. So I have a long and an unsigned long. I'm going to take in the two values and then see what happens there. Try to compile it. There's still a warning sign. And I apologize if the warning sign is bothering you, but I'm choosing to ignore. It's a number. Let me do this. -1, 2. It's a long number. 12. Okay. You see the int. Even though it says int, it was a long. So first one had a negative sign. The second one not a negative sign. But if it craps out if you put a negative sign. What else do I want to show? Character. Okay. I'll show you characters and then how to have a cin, two cins, I shouldn't say two cin, input of two variables on the same line. See how that one works. So I am going to make the first one a character and second one an integer. Enter a character followed by an integer, okay? User I had it on two different lines, but now I'm going to have it in one line. User entered value 1, and I'll show you guys the output. You can do this, and it's very common, but you should know how the compiler behaves when we do it in the same line. Okay, value 2 is not only the sum or anything, it's going to complain about the sum. So for those of you that are getting bothered by this, and look at this, can you do this? I've got a semicolon in the next line. Let's see what the compiler does and what you thought was correct or not. Okay, there is a warning and there is maybe uninitialized. User enter value 2 was uninitialized. That's fine. That's what I wanted. CPP. Then I'm going to do test1.cpp. Enter a character followed by an integer. Character is C space number 1. You see the space how it interpreted it? Let me try it again. If I do S followed by the number 12, what does it do? See what it did? Okay, let's try this. Um, what I've got over here is user entered value 1 followed by user entered value 2. And first one is a character and second one is an integer. And all I'm doing is I'm taking both of those in the same line. And watch, the semicolon is the next line. What do you guys think? Is it complain? Yes or no? It shouldn't complain. Because technically you can do that. Test1 dot out. Character W space 12. W space 12. It understood it. Now, how about if I said a $sign 12? It still understood it. How about multiple? $sign 1, 2, 3. It still understood it. Now, if you, here's an interesting one. I will put in a decimal number, 4.325. Watch what happens. It took the first one, and then the first one was a character. It didn't know about the second one, right? So it outputted 0. What else? So this was, this was to illustrate to you how you can use different data types, etc. Now you know about the data types. Now you know how to use them. And like I said, play around with it. Try out. I'm going to give you an assignment. Go over it, see how it's working out for you, and try to work on it ASAP. I'll also post the due date and time on it. Hopefully you're able to do it within the allocated time. Okay. All right. Well, best of luck for the assignment. You should be able to write a simple program, do basic arithmetic so far, and hope to see you soon in the next lecture.